Choosing Death was obviously your big launching point for, not only the book, but probably the magazine and your writing career. That was first published in 2004. Now you've done several revisions of the book with additions since then, like a 10-year anniversary, I believe, and I think one other one since then, right? Correct? Or two other ones?
Yeah, there was 2004 via Feral House, 2015 on Decibel Books, which is a launching of our book imprint, and then a version that's the current version that came out in 2016 on Bazillion Points.
Right. So that book is obviously made a huge impact, and it's one of those things for me. I've read it, probably half a dozen times. Just the chore of digging in and doing that kind of research. I mean, you're putting yourself under a microscope for one, because you're digging into an underground element that people are extremely passionate about. And I'm sure people would be, you make one little error on something and they're like, no, that was actually, 1996, or, you know what I mean? So you're really putting yourself under a microscope, but you did such a great job of putting all that together and, providing, because like we mentioned before, it's our generation was almost a generation of disconnect. It's whatever you got through tape trading or zines or, whatever, your buddy 3 states away could send you in a manila envelope for the zines in their area to hear about their bands. And I mean, it was really, like you talked about, our urge to be dumpster divers and archivalists and really dig for information. That book put all the puzzle pieces together that, you knew some things about some bands, especially on a global level. So we published in 2004. How long did it take from conception to delivery on a project of that scope?
Probably a little under 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, a little under 2 years. Because, it was kind of a different time in terms of, it's pre-social media.
Right.
So it was emails and phone numbers, and it was just like tracking people down that way. You couldn't like go online and Google Chris Reifert and then be like, oh, there's his, and then when you did get in touch with Chris Reifert, you would learn that he didn't have an email address because he didn't have a computer. So you had to call him and leave a message on his answering machine, and then he had to call you back. So there was a lot. The process was, there were just extras. It's not different than when you would reach out to somebody today to try to get them involved in a project like this. But there were extra steps where it was not an instantaneous process of, oh, I heard this, this guy's on this record, I can find him here. And then, within a day there's a contact made and an interview scheduled or what have you. And it was definitely a lot of, it was a lot of the, back in my day, we walked 12 miles to school both ways through the snow kind of thing. You had that, you had to transcribe the transcriptions just via, tape recorder, headphones, like stop, start, like typing it all out like that. There were no programs or anything like that. So it was just more of a time consuming process. And I think that one of the more interesting things that maybe now in retrospect, now that I think about it, like the internet as an archive for music and metal, I mean, literally Metal Archives, I don't know if it was a thing at, like when I was working on that book in 2002 and 2003. If it was in its infancy and I didn't know about it, and I probably wouldn't have trusted it back then either. Right. So you really needed to like talk to people, like to get like firm release dates of when something would come out. You would need to corroborate that with multiple people who were either in the band and or worked at the record label that it came out on. There's just like all these kinds of steps to tie all that stuff together. And then I would often find information online that was just like floating around from like webzines that were out there that were just full of errors. People who went on to become respected journalists in our world who would produce things, you know, in an authoritative voice 20 plus years ago about the history of this movement and just be so fucking wrong with so many details.
Sure.
So like you learned, you know, like stuff that, you know, again, things that I knew were wrong even before I began the process of doing interviews and research on the book. So really it's like those kinds of things. I'm not saying like making a book now or writing a book now would be easy, because it's never easy. It's always a nightmare. Mm-hmm. And since I work, you know, with authors regularly to edit and publish their books now, I see it. I see what they go through. I see what the process is. I see how it's changed. I see how it's stayed the same in some respects. So yeah, but yeah, it was definitely, overall it was a different, just more tedious process, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Not as much information just at your fingertips. So
yeah. And you know, and it was honestly, it was kind of cool, because it was like, I would do an interview, you know, I'd do like a 75 minute interview with like, I don't know, say Rick Ross or something, just throwing it out there. And like, I'd get off the phone and like half of the stuff that was discussed in the interview and conversation was stuff that was just brand new information to me, things I did not previously know. And that was really exciting. Like I could remember times where I'd get off the phone, like, and it would be like midnight, but it would be just like, I would have like all this great like information I thought I gathered, and I would just be wired, and I'd be like, I'm just going to start transcribing this right now. You know?